James Comey and House Republicans just made a breakthrough in their standoff over the former FBI director's testimony. He will address a House GOP committee this Friday, which means Republicans can grill him before they lose control of the House gavel. Now, the context here is critical. After 2 years in power, why are House Republicans pressing this fight against Comey right now? Republicans on the Judiciary Committee want Comey to only appear, initially they said, in a closed session, and Comey went to court to argue everything should be out in public. Comey's lawyer says the public hearing would combat any GOP efforts to peddle a distorted partisan political narrative about the Clinton and Russia investigations through selective leaks that Republicans might do about this week's hearing. Now, the news tonight is that the content of this hearing, the words themselves, will be public. Comey's side, according to this new agreement they reached, will get a transcript of the hearing within 1 day that can then be released. Now, why is Comey so skeptical about all this? Well, consider it was just 13 days ago, November 20th, when the New York Times exposed the bombshell that Trump personally demanded a criminal investigation of Comey, an act so blatantly unconstitutional, his own lawyer warned Trump it could lead to impeachment. Now, at the time, we reported on why that type of plan would be wrong and dangerous. Very few elected Republicans spoke out against it at the time. And then, get this, it was the very next day that House Republicans formally subpoenaed Comey to testify about Clinton and Russia in secret. So at the very time that Trump is exposed for trying to illegally target and apparently intimidate the former FBI director, a key Mueller witness to potential obstruction, House Republicans jump in to set up this secret interrogation of that same witness. That's one reason why this week's fight matters. It comes out of this whole brawl. Comey's attorney, David Kelly, even told a judge that Comey does welcome the opportunity to publicly testify, as he's done numerous times. He just doesn't want Republicans twisting his words from a private session. And that's where this gets really interesting, because think about it. Over the past 2 years, when James Comey has testified to Congress in public, it's mattered. It was at a Comey hearing that the Russia probe was first officially revealed.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
That was a big deal. And it was at another Comey hearing that so angered Trump because the then FBI director addressed some of the criticism of his own impact in the 2016 election.
Look, this was terrible. It makes me mildly nauseous to think that we might have had some impact on the election, but honestly, it wouldn't change the decision.
Now, everyone can debate whether Comey's right about his view there, but the reason we can all debate it is because the witness showed up and talked under oath in public. So, yes, it does look pretty suspicious that some Republicans don't want any of this in public this week. They want to talk to Comey in secret at the same time that Trump's busted for trying to target Comey. Now, when the president is trying to get you indicted and jailed, and members of Congress are subpoenaing you to force you to testify in secret, and Bob Mueller's interviewing you as a key witness, you need a good lawyer, even if you're James Comey, who is an experienced lawyer. You need someone who can litigate and maneuver through those forces, Mueller, Trump, Congress. So it's notable that Comey didn't tap a typical Washington counsel to handle these battles right now. He tapped a former federal prosecutor, and not just any prosecutor, but his former deputy at the Southern District of New York, David Kelly, who you can see here. That lawyer actually took over for Comey when he was promoted to Deputy Attorney General in the Bush administration. So Kelly ran that same office, SDNY. That's the office you might recognize because it's where Michael Cohen is currently being prosecuted. A powerhouse office that's also been run by some of the most recognizable lawyers in the country. You can see in that same room was other people, and others include Rudy Giuliani and Preet Bharara, who held it until he was fired by Trump. Now, in this post, Kelly also took some heat for pretty major cases, ranging from terror at the 1993 World Trade Center bombing to a case that has echoes of the Mueller probe that you can go to jail for lying to prosecutors. That's where Martha Stewart ended up. So I would argue there's few better guides right now to where this Comey legal battle is headed than his counsel and replacement at the Southern District, a man who rarely does TV interviews, attorney David Kelly, who is live on the beat. I should mention I also used to practice law with him until 2013. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be with you, Ari.
You are right in this fight with James Comey this week.
We are.
What got you to this breakthrough compromise with House Republicans, and is it clearly good enough in your view?
Well, it's not the best, but it's pretty close. I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. What Jim was trying to do here, he recognizes the oversight function of Congress, and he has tremendous respect for the institution. But what he wanted to do was not a disservice to the public, and he didn't want to engage in a disservice to a lot of the witnesses who appeared in these interviews before. He wanted to be transparent. If you want to know about these investigations, great. Let's talk about it publicly. And that's what this fight was about. What we achieved, we were running into an uphill battle on some of the legal issues, and that became clear to us, particularly in the hearing on Friday. So we struck an accommodation with the House Judiciary Committee on
You were
on
afraid
Saturday.
the judge was going to order Comey to testify no matter what?
Look, Judge McFadden gave us a tremendous hearing, but there is some good law in their favor. We think we had some really strong legal arguments. But at the end of the day, I think we probably would end up going up on appeal.
The core of your argument, though, is the fear or belief that these House Republicans are trying to rig the hearing. Do you and James Comey still have that view?
Well, it's interesting that there have been people, including the president, who talks about there being a rigged process. This has been an investigation. I wouldn't even really call it an investigation so much as it appears that the two committees conducting the investigation have reached a conclusion and then said, let's bring some witnesses in here and we'll do it in private and we'll take snippets of their testimony, we'll mold it into a mosaic that fits our political narrative, our partisan narrative. And that's what we're going to release to the public, not the unfiltered testimony. And Mr. Comey's view was, I don't want that. I don't want my testimony twisted in that way. Let's talk about this, and it's an important debate to have, but let's do it publicly. And that's what this argument was about. Now
They're pressing your client now, your friend and client, James Comey, at the very same time that we are learning that the President of the United States wanted to have him criminally investigated. Does that enter into this? Does James Comey view that as improper and potentially unconstitutional tampering with a witness?
Well, we don't really look at it from that perspective. We look at it in terms of pretty simply. This is not a friendly deposition where Jim is going to be treated more as
David,
an
I think that's an understatement.
No, look, I'm not going to get into discussions about whether it's obstruction, and Jim has already talked about situations publicly about where there might have been obstruction of justice, and Bob Mueller's looking into.
Yeah, but I'm going to press you on this, counsel to counsel. If firing an FBI director to impact an investigation may be an element of obstruction, and that's under investigation, certainly trying to investigate, indict, and jail an FBI director to affect investigation is worse.
Well, then you have to figure out, we talk about collusion, whether or not there's collusion between the committees and the White House in terms of putting this kind of pressure. We don't go there. We're not going there.
You don't go there for strategic reasons.
Well, we're not going there for a lot of reasons, but what we want to do is if the country wants to have a debate about these investigations, by golly, let's do it. But let's do it out in the open. And all this other, white noise in the background and trying to put words in his mouth, what we're trying to do is prevent that from happening.
When you look towards Friday, what are Mr. Comey's goals then? What good can come from this?
Look, what good can come from it is trying to get the facts out there in the open. And I think there's going to be a lot of attempts to put words in his mouth, a lot of attempts to hit him with, compound questions and put answers in his mouth that would fit this partisan mosaic. And we just have to be very careful to not permit that to happen and be very clear about what the facts of the investigation are.
Let me play Mr. Comey when he did speak. This was to George Stephanopoulos, I believe, about the issue that's back in the news this month, whether the Russians have something on President Trump. Take a look. Let me read to you what he said. We were looking for the video. He says, I think it's possible the Russians have something on Trump. I don't know. These are words I never thought I'd utter about a president, but it's possible. Is that something that, from your view of the case, Bob Mueller is also looking at?
I would guess so. I mean, I think that the purview of that investigation is quite broad. I'm certainly not the person to answer that question. I think Bob and his folks are probably looking at all of those things.
Well, you're a person to answer because you represent James Comey and you've been a federal prosecutor and you know Bob Mueller.
If I was in his shoes, that's what I'd be looking at.
You would look at that?
Yes.
Do you see, and again, I'm not asking you for the things you can't get into, but when you see the way these prosecutions have moved forward, and now you have people like Cohen coughing up more, you have people like Corsi that look close to Stone, do you see Bob Mueller moving towards the heart and the conclusion of this probe?
It's hard to say. Look, he's done an awful lot. What's really interesting, you have Congressman Gowdy, who spent several years trying to get an investigation, spent tens of millions of dollars on Benghazi and came up with nothing. And in a fraction of that time, Bob Mueller has come up with upwards of 30 indictments. So I think that's an interesting dynamic to these hearings.
You're saying Bob Mueller's proven much more effective than some of the House Republicans.
It's indisputable, frankly.
What does James Comey do when this is all over? Because other than the book, he's been pretty quiet.
Well, he's doing a lot of speaking. He speaks a lot about the book. He's on a speaking tour, and look, he takes life in five-year chunks, and there's always a new adventure and a new endeavor. And I think he has a lot to share with the public, and he'll be doing that in the years to come.
I've saved the hardest question for last. Are you ready?
I don't know.
One of the things that is most difficult to understand about Mr. Comey, who's obviously very smart and has a great record, is that in the book and in his work, he has continued to maintain he has zero regrets whatsoever, that he would do nothing differently. You're here as his representative. You know colleagues that you respect, people out of the Southern District, people out of DOJ, people in the legal community across the spectrum, have said there are certainly things he could have done differently in the way he ran 2016. Do you think that bears some greater reconsideration for him?
Now, let me just say two things. The way Jim looks at things, and I think some of his, the others that have held that office in the Southern District, there are important decisions, but there's not a lot of hard decisions. And the reason is because you make those decisions from your heart. You decide what you're going to do because it's the right thing to do. You don't make those decisions because of any sort of political influence or any sort of political considerations. And so that's why I think he's going to stand by the decisions he made. I think if he were to look back on this thing, lots of people can second guess what he did, but that was a 500-year flood. It's just not something that's come up before. So let all those folks decide they would do it differently. If he was to look back on it, might he have said some things differently? Maybe, maybe not. And that's, he's set that forth in the book, and I'll let him speak to that. But in terms of the decisions he made, no doubt, he's solid on that.
And do you expect any big news to come out of Friday?
I think if there's big news that comes out on Friday, it's because it would be that the Republicans have tried to go ahead and twist things and get ahead of the 8 ball. And what we've done is set up some conditions that interview to really try to prevent that.
David, you are right in the middle of all this. People don't get to hear directly from you very often. I appreciate you coming on the beat.
Thank you.
David Kelly. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.